Science and Research Applications here at the Sustainability Consortium. Been leading our ag metrics work for a number of years now, and we're really excited today. The focus of really the entire summit is on resiliency, and today we're focusing the agricultural metrics workshop with that same theme. So we're really focusing on resiliency and regeneration in the age of climate change and COVID. And so what I'll try to do is weave through this theme throughout all of our presentations today, and really keep reinforcing. This is really what we're trying to focus on. We have been through a lot this last year. We've learned a lot in terms of our ability to shift in the wake of global disruption. We've really learned a lot about the areas of improvement that we need to make in our food systems. And we really learned about how important sustainability is to truly being a resilient, having a resilient food system. And so the agenda today, we're first going to kick it off with a keynote that's focused on what did the last year teach us, with a focus on the role of tech in scaling up regenerative agriculture. And then we have a message from our TSC Summit sponsor, the U.S. Soybean Export Council, and all the work that they're doing around sustainability. And then a brief year in review for all of the activities that we've done in the food, bev, and ag space in the last year. I'll say, even though we've gone virtual, we've definitely not slowed down. And so we'll be happy to quickly go through some of those activities for you and review our successes there. And then we have a great panel that's really going to discuss the connections and the scalability and the ability to streamline through using technology to really try to pull through data from field all the way to retail and through TSC's KPIs, and do that in a way that really does reduce the burden for farmers and everyone along the supply chain, so that we can focus on impact and focus our efforts around driving impact rather than collecting data. And so we're excited to share that case study with you all. And then we're going to take a deeper dive on some research that we've done with Trust in Food. And it's just a continuation of a partnership that we started last year to do research with farmers to really understand their perspectives on data, both collecting, sharing, and reporting data. And then lastly, we're going to talk about a new initiative that TSC is forming called the Resilient Agriculture Fund, and some partnership opportunities that we have there to get on the ground regenerative agriculture and resilient agriculture in US agriculture. So we're excited for that. And as I mentioned, it's a jam-packed agenda, so we're going to get on our way. I did want to remind you all that within the Pathable platform, this is where we will be hosting the chat. And so there is a chat function in the Pathable platform. And so there's also a chat function in the Zoom platform, but go to the Pathable platform where you signed in. And this is where we'll be monitoring the chat. I also wanted to point out that there's files here that our speakers have uploaded and that I have uploaded. Our workshop agenda, which is more detailed, is here. And then we also have several reports from TSC, as well as the reports from some of our speakers. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to our first speaker, Shauna Day. She is from Better Food Ventures and Culterra Capital. Hi, Shauna.
Hi. Thanks very much for having me. Good to be with everybody. My name is Shauna Day, and I'm a venture partner with Better Food Ventures and a partner with Culterra Capital. And I'm dialing in today from California's Central Valley. So that's where I'm based these days. I'm really excited to talk about this topic and see, make sure I'm advancing the slides here. All right, sorry about that, folks. Like I said, I could probably spend about 3 weeks talking about alignment and roadblocks and resiliency and outcome, but today I'm really going to try to condense that into about 15 minutes and focus on the role of technology in enabling a more sustainable, resilient value chain. Let me just pause here for a second, make sure that the slides are keeping up. Christy, I might give it one more try, and then there we go. Christy, maybe I can ask you to help me out with the slides. I think mine's a little bit of a delay. So anyway, I'm going to keep moving along. but one of the, I kind of want to look at this through three themes today, and really that's realism and where we are. Thanks, Christy. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Realism, where we are, resiliency, which is obviously the theme for the day in the next few days, and then reward. And I think reward comes in a lot of different forms, and as we're looking across the supply chain, can really accrue to a lot of folks here. And I want to be clear that my approach is really through the lens of an early stage technology investor. So at Better Food Ventures, we look at food tech and ag tech companies, and that's where we're making investments in the space and kind of everything in between. So just keep that in mind as I'm running through the slides here, as there are certainly many dimensions in terms of culture, mindset, science, and I know all of those things will be covered, but today I'm really going to talk about the technology and the role of innovation. Next slide, please. I've spent about the last 18 months or so, fortunately, thinking about some of these topics, both looking at food supply chain technology, so those innovations that are impacting from the farm gate through about the loading dock of the food of the retailers, food service providers, and all of the constituent technology in between. And I also had a great opportunity to do a deep dive into climate smart soil practices and technologies together with USFRA and Croatan Institute last year. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. I know I'm kind of trying to boil the ocean here between in-field technologies and supply chain. So I'm going to move quickly, but appreciate that there are a lot of great minds here, and there has been a tremendous amount of leadership and work that's been done to date. And really a lot of those leaders are in this room or on the Zoom today. And tools like Thesis and great companies like Supply Shift that are powering those MRV programs, and how the real world kind of end-to-end data collection and sharing is working. Fantastic work. In my kind of through my venture lens, I'm really going to be thinking about that in terms of scaling up those technologies. So what needs to happen across the board as far as investment is concerned, and ecosystem development to really scale up a lot of that tremendous work that's been done to date. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about how, when we dove into our food supply chain tech analysis, we really looked at innovation and the evolution of innovation over the last 75 years in the food system. And we looked to supply chain 4.0 type trends, and we looked at manufacturing and industry 4.0 trends to really start to understand how the market was evolving in the food industry. What kinds of breakthrough technologies development were we starting to see across the board that could be applied to the nuances of the food supply chain, because it is different than the sort of horizontal manufacturing, horizontal supply chain management. There are some very distinct nuances that we really understood had to be considered when we were talking about food and ag. Next slide. So as we thought about, and really started to get excited about some of those system-wide challenges that we saw as forming the groundwork for the impending shift in the system, we really did a lot of work researching with operators, with food service providers, with retailers, with food manufacturers to understand how the challenges that people were sort of facing from an external standpoint were impacting their operations. And in talking to those stakeholders, we really came to the very distinct thesis that putting off investment in the food supply chain was no longer a sustainable strategy. The cost of maintaining legacy systems, the siloed data that really was limiting visibility into cost drivers and missed revenue opportunities, the increased direct-to-consumer omnichannel sales putting pressure on food processing line, manufacturing line, distribution. The labor shortages, certainly in workforce readiness, are a huge issue of concern with a lot of those folks in the supply chain. And as well, of course, the demands from the market and investors to really put dedicated resources towards traceability and sustainability. One of the things I thought was really staggering to me was understanding that when it came to investment in technology, in internal systems, IT systems, CPGs are around 2% of their annual revenue. Food processors are about 1.3% of their annual income goes into investing into that critical infrastructure, frankly, now. And when you look at the other segments of our economy, that really is a significant underinvestment relative to other key drivers of economic growth and just key or critical infrastructure. So the question then becomes, how does the supply chain keep up? And next slide, please. Putting my investor hat back on, I thought this was really interesting when we started to map, particularly in the innovation ecosystem, where the value creation to date had really been accruing, and it's at the endpoints, right? It's on the food tech side with more of the consumer facing technologies, on the ag tech side, really in the inputs. And this is actually looking at the number of unicorns in the food tech and ag tech space, and soon to be unicorns at 500 million in valuations and above. And what's rather stark here is the kind of lack of big investment dollars, frankly, going into those companies that are looking at the messy middle of food and ag. Next slide, please. So where does that leave us? And this is an eye chart. I've got it available in the agenda, and certainly you can visit our website, download this. But essentially, our deep dive culminated in a new landscape, a food supply chain tech landscape. And again, this is looking at from the farm gate to the loading dock of retail and food service. And we uncovered about 650 companies that had a dedicated focus on food and ag, food and bev across this landscape. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one, but suffice it to say, we're really optimistic about the opportunities to invest within the supply chain and the significant opportunity to have a real impact on modernizing our supply chain. Next slide, please. So I'm gonna quickly wrap up this part of my talk on supply chain before I move over to a few more of the kind of more in-field tech adoption drivers. But I do want to just kind of put a bow on this with the 5 trends that we think are really going to accelerate tech adoption. And I want to bring that back home in a way that sort of speaks to what you'll be talking about over the next few days, and how this investment, how this innovation can really support MRV and reporting throughout the supply chain, and where we need more investment, essentially. So if you look at supply, the first mile from farm gate to the primary processor, packer, shipper, this is the part of the ecosystem that has by far the least amount of digitalization today. And we feel like first mile digitalization is mission critical. The ability to be able to get that data attached to the crop or the commodity that's coming off the field. In many cases, it becomes very complicated once it's aggregated or blended. So how do you put in place the right technologies to enable monitoring and tracking there? And then, of course, as we start to think about things like first mile logistics and a more intelligent logistics optimization, just moving basic blocking and tackling, moving loads around, yard optimization, and the potential that technology has to play a role in GHG reduction, tracking, monitoring, optimizing that part of the supply chain. Then second, in production, where are we on the journey to Industry 4.0 readiness in food processing, in plants, in manufacturing, and really being able to do that batch and lot level tracking that's needed to pass the data that's coming from the field through to the next point in the supply chain. I think this is one that certainly there's a lot of great horizontal technology in the space that's managing ERP systems, operation management, but what it does lack is the ability to do that lot level, batch level tracking and tracing, which is essential for the assembly or disassembly in food and ag. So we really see a movement towards more verticalized software here that is focused on food and ag specific data sets. On the logistics and distribution side, injecting more intelligence, more monitoring, more IoT into this part of the market, we think is extraordinarily important. As we talk to retailers, one of the things we heard on a recurring basis was how little visibility there was within the distribution. That tends to become a blind spot, and really that becomes a data blind spot as well. So we think more investment in monitoring and certainly things like environmental monitoring, that has a huge impact on quality and ultimately rejections and waste on the retail side as well. On the demand side, we really saw that this was probably the most digitally progressive or forward in terms of where the overall supply chain was. We see more retailers using demand-driven technologies, but we do believe there's going to be a significant increase in that as well, just as those buyers, as retailers, food service providers look to get more information about their suppliers, more analytics to optimize their procurement in a more sophisticated way. And really this data, then, as you start to put these pieces together, you enable number 5, right? Tighter connection between demand and supply in order to really create these opportunities for MRV at scale. So next slide, please. So now I'm going to quickly jump over to the farming side of the equation. Next slide. And I'll present another dizzying sort of eye chart here. So last year we did the Climate Smart Soil Tech Landscape. And again, this is available. You can download it as well. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. And I have a feeling over the next few days, you will spend a tremendous amount of time talking about a lot of these technologies and opportunities for you and your companies to play a role. Next slide. So again, this is nothing that's unfamiliar to anybody here. I'm gonna, as we talk about the definitions, I'm gonna really focus on number 1, and I see that later in the day you will be as well. But this improvement to soil health, I think, is really what the backbone of my discussion is going to be. What was interesting about this study was that 50% of the journal. The articles that were surveyed, and it was, I think, over 1,000 articles, only 50% had some definition of regenerative agriculture. And to me, that just sort of reinforces, how important it is to start to get specific about definitions and really helping not only the consumer but the farmer understand what we're talking about here. Next slide. So I was part of a study or a report that was done together with USFRA and Croatan Institute, and we published it earlier in 2021, I think in February 2021, and some of you may be familiar with this as well. But the report covers 3 fundamental areas: soil health practices and the benefits for farmers, the state of ag tech for soil health and carbon sequestration, and transformative finance mechanisms. So not surprisingly, I was responsible for the state of ag tech, and that's what I'm going to spend the next few slides focusing on here as well. Next slide. Okay, so this farmer perspectives on data collection and sharing. Obviously, the Sustainability Consortium and Trust in Food put this great bit of research together. I'm going to zero in on 3 of the kind of subsets: low software usage and digitalization. And I'm going to talk about that in the context of the farmer's data integration journey. Number 2, unequal profit distributions. I'm going to talk about that one in the role of technology supporting business cases for practice adoption. And then finally, I'm going to just briefly touch on the advocacy and trusted advisor role and how that relates really to the flywheel of data and decision making. Again, all through the kind of lens of technology, and just want to triple underline, this is an incredibly complex journey, and the role and the other dimensions of culture, mindset, support structure, all of the non-technical things are equally as important in this discussion. Next slide. Okay, so in understanding the complexity of the farmer's digital integration journey, I've used this context or this framework a lot as I've thought about precision ag adoption over the last 5 or 6 years. And really that first step, right? Using Excel, using farm management software, record keeping, calculators, kind of making that first step from pen and paper or information that lives in a farmer's head into that kind of basic digitalization. What happened last season? The next question is, why did it happen, right? And here we see farmers starting to introduce into that kind of into that decision-making framework remote sensing, aerial imagery, maybe weather, soil sampling, soil monitoring. And to be honest, that's where most farmers are today. And I think in that study, 38% are using technology, some sort of technology. The balance of the rest of those surveyed were not. So we know that we're still in the early stages. As you start to progress along that digital or that data integration journey, you look at what can we change? How do we benchmark ourselves? How do we integrate these data sets to make perhaps more sort of more decisions around management zones, thinking about practice adoption and how that might impact the other aspects of your operations. And then finally, we kind of get to that continuous improvement, that part of the journey. And I think the holy grail here in all the work that we've done over the last couple of years is really the ability to do that scenario modeling. And technologies like TrueTerra's are fantastic here. And we really admire that ability to say, hey, if I implement this practice, how might it impact my profitability? How might it impact my yield? And to help farmers along that journey by providing that scenario modeling and planning capability, which requires, frankly, a lot of sophisticated data integration in order to help them, minimize the risk of practice adoption. So that's really, one of the areas of complexity that I know you'll talk about. Extraordinarily important, though, to understand and be kind of grounded in the reality of where we are today. Next slide, please. So in addition to the complexity of data integration, we have the complexity of building a business case for adopting regenerative practices. And again, it's I think we really came to understand that this is an iterative process. In order to incur the cost of practice adoption, there's got to be a compelling business case. So what is the first step in basic soil mapping and nutrient management? What is my business case for implementing basic digitalization there to measure and manage that? Then kind of moving up the staircase, I observe changes, right? What is then the business case for managing my soil health? For making those incremental practice changes in my operation and likely incurring some costs, whether it's equipment or labor or learning curve, there's got to be that business case attached to it. And as you continue to move along that journey, that business case adoption journey, once you get comfortable with making those incremental changes and observing what's happening in the field, you start to think about, okay, can we make the business case for some sort of practice, scaling that practice into more of the operations, a broader set of the operations, in such a way that we've got either some cost sharing or market-based payments that are really reinforcing those changes and the verification of them. And finally, that alignment, that business model, true business model alignment with your between your buyers and your suppliers. So as you can see, there's a lot of complexity here. And again, I could probably spend a week unpacking this with folks on the phone today or on the Zoom today, but suffice it to say, really that alignment and understanding that complexity and the iterative nature of that journey is so critical. Next slide, please. So this is an interesting one. And really, I think technology's role in scaling the regenerative practices through this concept of a digital ag flywheel. I think we hear a lot about flywheels these days, and we've seen this in a tech setting. But I want to link this back to the importance of support and advocacy. Farmers have to think about this complexity of trying, measuring, analyzing, adapting. And if you look at these boxes, you've got data modeling, visualization, we've got lab methods, we've got AI and machine learning. That's not in the wheelhouse of a farmer's day-to-day what they're focused on, right? It's really, this is a real opportunity for the support structure, the farming support structure, to really lean in and help and assist farmers in sort of creating this flywheel to understand, with better collection and connection of data, how does that accelerate their comfort level with adopting practices? Next slide. Okay, so I raced through that very quickly, and I know I threw a lot at you to kind of launch you on this exciting journey over the next couple of days. But as you kind of set forth and think more about the resilient and regenerative food system that you all envision, and I think so many of us envision, there are two things I was really hoping to impart here. One, investment in modernizing the supply chain to support data sharing and MRV on its own. It's a hard sell in a low margin business, especially when you're talking to a food processor or distributor. But I think once it's linked to the ability to not only capture that information and pass it along, but drive better agility, more efficiency, more profitability, and really make the business case, you create that reward alignment needed to scale. And then two, investment in the tools and technologies to aid in farmers' regenerative practice adoption journey is not caught up with, I think, where the downstream enthusiasm is. And we have to continue to ground ourselves in that realism, but thinking about how your organizations can help support those business cases. And again, the reward alignment that's needed to scale up, you play an extraordinarily important role. So with that, I'm going to thank you very much for your attention and wish you luck in the best of your discussions today, and just remind you that the landscape and the report are available in the portal. If you'd like to contact me, I love this topic, so I'd be happy to chat with anybody about some of these observations, what we've learned, and anything else that might be interesting. So thank you very much, Christy.
Thank you, Shauna. Thank you so much for all that great information. I realized I asked Shauna to cover a lot, and she did. So thank you all. So thank you so much. And thanks for bearing with our technology hiccups. This is the first session. So we are working things out. So Shauna, thank you so much. And if you do have questions for Shauna, if you would like, just please put them in the chat in the Pathable platform, and we can all monitor that, and we can respond to you. So feel free to do that. And with that, I'd like to introduce our next speakers. So we have our summit sponsor with the U.S. Soybean Export Council, and they're also our newest member of the Sustainability Consortium. I want to introduce Babb. So thank you for joining us today to tell us about the exciting work that you all are doing in sustainability as it relates to soy.
Well, thanks so much, Christy, and thanks to TSC for all the good work you've been doing and providing a community for everybody to discuss these topics. So just quickly to highlight, and I think see several names I know, but are in companies. So USEC, we're a nonprofit trade association representing U.S. farmers, soybean farmers, and the U.S. soy industry. I'm a regional director for Europe and MENA. And in normal times, I spend about half my time in Europe, but I'm based in St. Louis, so half time here and half time in Europe and Middle East. Next slide, please. And really, we started talking a lot about sustainability in Europe 8-9 years ago. We developed our program, but just to highlight that, what I kept hearing from the industry over there was they want something verified, tested, really at a national scale impact. There's a lot of programs that are implemental, make small changes, headed in the right direction, but you need something at a national scale that really can make an impact. And just as we're talking today, metric based. And I think the US industry, ag industry, and the industries really lead the world on metric based analysis. In Europe, still it's more of a checklist based. Did you do this? Check, 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 without the metrics, and low cost. So to meet all these, we came up with the SSAP Soy Sustainability Assurance Protocol. Next slide, please. And just to highlight the adoption of this program, and as it was mainly asked for by the Europeans, but it's been adopted globally in the last 8 years. Starting in 2014, we just had a few thousand tons. These last 3 years, we've had over 20 million tons, and just year to date, from October through this, so we're 7-8 months through, we're 24 million tons for this marketing year of SSAP use. So about 5 million tons of that's in Europe, but the rest is in China, Latin America, other parts of Asia, and so on. So it's a global program that's requested by customers around the world. And it represents, 24 million tons represents about 10% of all soy exported by origin. So a lot of use, a lot of interest in this program. Next slide, please. In Europe, the main discussion, soil quality, we just heard about, is starting to be discussed, but the main focus is on land use change. And in the US, this isn't just soy specific, this is all cropland, all agriculture. We have a great story to tell. We've increased forest 2 million hectares since 1980, so in the last 40 years. And that cropland, has been decreased by 20 million hectares. So we see all these numbers of growth and more production, but we've done it much more efficiently, better use of resources, less impact on the environment. Next slide, please. And this is, we work field to market and USDA, we thank them for all the analysis and the metrics they do. So these are just some of the success we've had in impacting those numbers. And we continue to look at other metrics to measure, from biodiversity, more on water usage and water quality. So these are primary what we've looked at in the past. Is soil erosion, very big to our farmers, of course, energy and emissions. Being able to reduce those by 40% is great success. Next slide, please. And last slide, just to want to highlight, to be a little deeper dive. This is the carbon footprint of soybeans used in Europe by the main production origins. So you look at the US, the blue part of the graph is the cultivation with a very little transportation. And then the maroon is the land use change. And you can see with the land use change in both Brazil and Argentina, much, much higher carbon footprint. And the US is even lower than all the soy production in Europe. Very efficient way of growing it, less impact on the environment. So looking at the US, we're 10 to 15 times less carbon footprint than the soy that's coming in from South America. So a lot of negative on soy in Europe, but in reality, it's a concern of origin, not soy in general. And this is just on the carbon footprint of looking at soy, but we're also looking at that in the protein units. And then we'll follow that through for our consumers and through the supply chain to look at that on products. For instance, in Netherlands, if you used only US soy, you could reduce your carbon footprint in a poultry for a pound or for a kilo by about 40%. So a lot of opportunity, a lot of good data. We look forward to using this in Europe, throughout the world, and US as needed. So thanks again, Christy, for the opportunity, and look forward to the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Brent, for sharing that global perspective on the soy industry and the metrics that you are and the programs that you all are launching. And so it all connects back with Shauna's presentation and really, thinking about how do we have a more resilient supply chain? How do we have more secure food systems? It is really through this knowledge, through this research, through this measurement, and through sharing that in venues like this. So thank you very much for sharing that with us today. And next up, we're gonna highlight some of the activities of TSC's food, beverage, and agriculture sector. So we have, as I mentioned, we've not slowed down just because we've gone virtual. We have been plugging away here, and so with many of you. And so with that, I'd also like to introduce my colleague, Teresa Garcia Moore. Many of you may not have met her yet. She has been with TSC. She started about a year ago, and she is now our full-time manager for our food, beverage, and agriculture sector. She comes to us with she just finished her PhD in public policy as it relates to an agricultural public policy. And then she has a background in law. And so she actually has an agricultural LLM and has just, she's just dove in to TSC's research and has just been a wonderful member of our team. So welcome, Teresa.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Like Christy mentioned, we had lots of exciting projects going on in the FBA working group here at TSC this past year, despite COVID. And we want to share some of those projects with you all today. And so I will start off with the report that we published with the Wake Forest University, funded by the Meridian Institute, in which we evaluated the efficacy and value of sustainable cotton initiatives in the US, and focused on the role of growers, the initiatives, and corporations. And for this report, we conducted several interviews with BCI, E3, Cotton Leads, among others, really looking at these initiatives here on the screen to explore the impact that these programs have on growers and on sustainable cotton in the US in general. And we have lots of interesting insights there, companies' perspectives, farmers' perspectives, traceability issues in the supply chain. And so if you're interested in that work, you can download the report on our website. Next slide, please. Another project that we want to highlight is TSC's resource guide on sustainable animal feed, which was the main request of our stakeholders engaged in our Feeding Our Food discussion group. And so the purpose of the guide was to compile all these different resources related to feed together in one place, so you can more easily know what is available across the supply chain. And we included a description of different initiatives, leading organizations, tools, reports, all related to sustainable feed, and the respective links to those resources if you want to take a deeper dive into. And that research took the form of a website. And so if you're interested in that guide, want to learn more, you can find TSC's resource guide on sustainable feed online and free on our website. And I just want to highlight that we will be discussing next projects related to feed and the Feeding Our Food discussion group in one of our breakout sessions later today. And so if you're interested in that, please join us later. And now I will hand it over to Christy so she can talk about the commodity mapping project.
Thank you, Teresa. And so just a few highlights of the commodity mapping program. I realize that this has been going on in parallel with the FBA sector for a number of years, but it's really starting to take shape in the form of we're starting to do some unique projects with the tool. And so one of those projects was with Walmart to create their forest conservation supplier guide. And so last year we utilized the functionality of the commodity mapping tool to highlight the high risk deforestation supply regions for high risk commodities. And so we put this in the form of maps and a resource that's on the Walmart Sustainability Hub, so that suppliers can go onto the Sustainability Hub and learn really what the highest risk jurisdictions are for those high risk deforestation commodities. And then that work was also done in conjunction with the World Wildlife Fund, Conservation International, Environmental Defense Fund, and the Nature Conservancy. And then we always love to highlight our members who use our commodity mapping platform. And so Campbell's Soup Company has been using the platform for a number of years now. And most recently, starting in 2019, and then we finished up the project in 2020, they analyzed 30 commodities across their supply chains. And so we really did look at their sourcing regions and highlighted for them where there are opportunities for improvement. And so really love to partner with our member companies to utilize the commodity mapping tool. Also in the background, some of the most important things that happen that kind of go on behind the scenes is the science. And so TSC is also very active in the development of some of the science work that actually is utilized in the commodity mapping platform. And so back in 2018, we partnered with the World Resources Institute and University of Maryland to create what is now kind of the de facto map for looking at the drivers of deforestation globally. Since then, we have utilized that same map and use that to really analyze where there are forest carbon losses and also gains. And so we've leveraged that existing research from 2018 and published a new research project in 2021 in Nature Climate Change. And so this really does allow users to see where there are forest essentially sinks, where we're losing forests and where we're taking carbon and losing carbon and emitting it into the atmosphere, and where trees are actually sequestering carbon in the world. And then of course, we're going to take the next step and try to link that to supply chains and commodities. And so the ongoing research with WRI, we just received a $150,000 grant, which we're very excited about, to continue our work with them and to combine all of this work and take it forward at a higher resolution. And so we'll be doing that over the next year. Teresa, would you like to update us on our KPI revisions?
Yes, we're very excited to share with you all the changes to our KPIs and new content that TSC will be releasing this year. And so we have 4 new assessments, starting with our antibiotics stewardship assessment. We're creating this content, which will be available across different animal protein categories. So for beef, dairy, pork, chicken, eggs, and turkey. And we want to invite our stakeholders to get involved in this process. We will be sending out invitations to our members with first draft of this new antibiotics assessment. And we will have a feedback period after that, as well as a session to discuss it. And so if you're interested in participating in the development of this content, you can send us a note and we will send you an invitation as well as the first draft. The second assessment is the pollinator health assessment. We're happy to announce that we have finalized that content, and it focuses on 4 main topics. So IPM certifications, pollinator habitat, pesticide use and reduction planning, and responsible pest management practices. And we wanted to thank those of you that provided your feedback and helped us in develop this new content. The third assessment that we have is a beef assessment focused on the cow-calf stage. And the last assessment is a new animal welfare assessment for turkey. And so now TSC has an animal welfare assessment for all the major animal species. And we have also revised some of our existing KPIs. And now in terms of revisions, TSC has revised the palm oil KPI to distinguish between the 4 RSPO supply chain models. So the identity preserved, mass balance, segregated, and book and claim RSPO model. And so each response option will ask about these different models. We have also updated the pesticide use KPI to include TSC's responsible pest management framework to inform the response options and also as a tool for respondents. And we have also updated the child labor and indigenous peoples and community rights KPI to include more specific questions that go beyond just a risk assessment. And we have also included the food loss and waste generation KPI in more categories. And finally, we have updated the sustainable packaging design and production KPI to include the how to recycle label as one of the response options. So these were the main revisions and new content that TSC will be releasing this year. And I'll hand it over back to Christy so she can talk a little bit about the next topic and introduce the next guests.
Thank you, Teresa. All right, so there's a lot going on at TSC, so hopefully that was a nice quick overview. If you've missed out on anything, if you have any questions, please let us know. And with that, I really want to focus on our next panel. And so we have been, as you know, as members of TSC, we've been working hard to streamline reporting because we want the reporting to be easy so that the focus and the energy can be on driving impact. And so I'm really happy to have the next group of speakers with us today because we have worked hard to accomplish that and really make it easier to transfer data all the way from the field all the way down to retail into TSC KPIs. And we've done that through partnerships and of course through software. And so I really want to invite or welcome our speakers, Rod Snyder from Field to Market, Chris Benning from My Farms, Andrew Utterbach from Ingredion, and John Radke from Coca-Cola. So thank you all for joining us today. And so Rod, would you like to share with us a little bit of the background and a little bit of the history of our collaboration to get us to this point?
Yes, absolutely, Christy. Thanks so much for inviting us and for making space for this particular conversation. I'm really excited to talk a bit more about what's happening in practice here. So just to give a little bit of context, Field to Market, the Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture is the largest not-for-profit multi-stakeholder initiative that's focused on the sustainability of commodity crop production in the United States. So that is our geographic focus and our cropping focus. We have nearly 150 member organizations from across the food and ag value chain. Always been very science-based and outcomes-based, and metrics for the ag sector have really been our specialty. If we go back to 2014, Field to Market signed its first MOU that still actually is governing our relationship today with the Sustainability Consortium. So Field to Market, TSC, about 7 years ago, basically agreeing to a couple of key principles. First is that we wanted to commit to content harmonization, overlapping product categories, and then also to try to move to as much data platform interoperability as possible. And so it's taken quite a while to sort of realize or implement these ambitions and aspirations. But over the last 7 years, we've been working together with the notion of we need sustainability schemes like TSC and Field to Market to be better aligned to reduce duplication, increase efficiency, make things easier for the farmer and for the value chain if we're really going to be able to scale these types of sustainability assessment activities. That's really, I think, the goals that have underpinned this work. So in 2017, we published the first ever toolkit that provided very specific guidance that if you were collecting data through Field to Market programs and projects using the FieldPrint platform, how could that information also be used to report against TSC key performance indicators? And we basically published a report that was a how-to guide of where the data was relevant, what those conversion factors needed to be in order to actually report into TSC and any retailers that were using those KPIs. And that document in 2017 formed the basis for specifically implementing what we thought was possible. And then fast forward into 2019 and 20, we began working to actually on the data and digital interoperability piece to actually come up with some automatic conversions so that you didn't have to do this in the background, but that within the platform or with within some of our qualified data management partners, which you're going to hear from one today, My Farms, that you could actually automatically have data collected from these Field to Market projects and then basically turned into the KPI conversions. So there's been a lot of technical work between the teams of these two organizations over the last few years to get to this point. I'm excited about this case study because it really brings it to life, what we've been attempting to do for a while now. And just keeping in mind that we want value to be realized by the farmer in terms of analytics that are meaningful for them at the farm level, but also that can easily and efficiently flow through the value chain. So at the end of the day, we can all drive towards impact. So Christy, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thanks, Rod. Thanks for giving that background and the history of our collaboration and really where we've come from and where we're heading. So maybe Chris, if you could advance to the next slide. See if our screen sharing is working this time. All right, there we go. Okay. So really just to give a little bit of an introduction to what we are discussing here today. So we, as I mentioned, we have really set out to try to integrate software into as many partner systems as we can to try to streamline the reporting process. And we set out to do that about 2 years ago, and really Field to Market's been and My Farms has been the one that's really taken up this mission and run with it and really tried to integrate the calculation tools within their platforms to be able to enable this easy transfer of data in the supply chain. And so what we're going to discuss today is really a case study and really walk you through what was accomplished through this partnership and who benefited and get perspectives on what the value is of being able to really integrate software solutions into the supply chain reporting. So I'll hand it over to Chris.
All right, Christy, I think I might have lost.
All right, no problem. Go ahead now. Share it again.
While Christy's doing that, I'll just say that I think that Shauna did a great job of giving us a framework for thinking about innovation and evolution in innovation. And I think Ingredion is a great case study, not only for the immediate purpose of talking about the TSC KPIs, but I thought just a little bit of background so you have a sense for what Ingredion has done over the past 5 or 6 years. The identity preservation program that they specialize in dates back to 2008. And we started focusing on digitizing that in 2016 to collect field boundaries and planting records. There we go. And so we were able to begin by digitizing an existing application and tying it to existing enterprise applications that we took all the way back to the field level, which is really kind of that first building block that Shauna talked to us about. They then said, well, since you've already got the field boundary and planting records for our traceability program, let's see if we can pass that over to the FieldPrint platform and begin calculating outcomes. And Rod just mentioned the API, which we implemented then in 2017 or so. I'm not sure I'm seeing what I would expect there.
Let's see. Are you seeing my screen, Chris?
I'm not.
Okay, let's try again.
I also have it up on my side, if that would be helpful.
Let's see, it's not. You can see it, Andrew? Okay, great. Can you see it, Chris?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Do you want to advance it then for
Sure.
us? Okay, great. So as I mentioned, Ingredion said, why not pass the same data we're already collecting over to the FieldPrint platform to calculate outcomes, which we do now. We're passing field data. Field to Market then returns the FieldPrint analysis, which includes 8 environmental outcomes. And among them are greenhouse gas emissions, erosion, and irrigation water use efficiency, of course. So Ingredion has really taken the initiative for I don't know, the past decade to move and sort of advance their enterprise through that evolutionary process to deliver on what end customers are really seeking. And all of it begins, of course, at the field level, which you can see there on the left-hand side. Just last year, to give another example of evolutionary progress, we're enabling farmers to begin learning from each other about the economic value of practices. So it's not just about data collection, it's not just about reporting outcomes, but it's helping farmers determine which of 15 different practices are most likely to pay on their unique farming operation. And that's by mashing up data that they're already entering into the FieldPrint platform with other publicly available data sources, remote sensing technology, and so forth and so on. So anyway, I just want to give some kudos to Ingredion because I think they've done a lot and have proactively invested in their ability to deliver on these demands among customers. So getting back to the TSC KPIs, the next step in the process is then for Ingredion to assign growers to customers, because of course, the calculations we produce, we need and want to have directly associated with specific fields and specific practices that were applied to those fields. And so once a farmer has at least one field print in the system, they can be assigned to any of Ingredion's customers. They can then run a report in My Farms that takes that field print analysis that Field to Market returns and converts it automatically into the KPIs that TSC has specified and that Field to Market has harmonized. And so Ingredion can export that data. They can email it over to customers like Coca-Cola as an Excel spreadsheet. Coca-Cola then has exactly what they need, just 4 numbers that can then be entered into the Thesis platform, which of course ultimately is consumed and used by ag retail stakeholders. So hopefully that gives you a sense for the workflow and kind of where My Farms and Field to Market fit into the process.
Thank you, Chris. And with that, there we go. So with that, I'd really like to hear from both Andrew and John about the value that this has brought to you all as you are trying to meet your customer needs for information, and also just the learning that's happened as a result of having information about what's going on the farms and how you've been able to work with your suppliers. So Andrew, would you like to go first?
Yeah, for sure. I'll grab it next because probably I'm the next link in this supply chain. So when we looked at it from the Ingredion perspective, and thank you very much, Chris, for the kudos, and thank you for your help in taking our paper and file cabinets and getting them to a digitized area where we can actually do something with the data. But when we look at it, we're collecting this data, and we look at sustainability as a differentiator that Ingredion can have for customers, can kind of put us ahead in conversations with procurement teams and others. And when we look at being able to take something like the data that goes into the KPI report and being able to send it in a format to a company like Coca-Cola, where they can use it and answer the questions quickly and easily, we think that's a big differentiator, because in the past, either Ingredion had to calculate those numbers manually using the guidelines that Rob mentioned earlier and pass that along, or we sent a bunch of field print data, like the background data, to the customer themselves and let them, hey, figure it out yourself and make sure you're answering these KPIs correctly. So from our side, we see it as a way to save resources, to prevent mistakes in calculations, prevent double counting and things like that. And then be a way to, as Christy mentioned when she was introducing this section, take it from data collection and analysis and spending time and resources on that, and really getting it to where we have time and resources and money for a conversation on how do we take this data and what we're doing with the farmers and have an impact and actually have better sustainable outcomes and bring value to help growers choose new practices or de-risk the implementation of practices on their farms. So we're really excited to work on this project, because it streamlines the whole process, and it allows us to focus on the things that we really think are important when we think about sustainable agriculture. And maybe with that, I'll hand it over to John and kind of let him talk about it from his perspective on what impact that has from the Coca-Cola sustainability side.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And thanks everybody for inviting me here to just briefly share our experience with this new platform. So I don't know if you guys have ever answered all the questions and provided all the data in that thesis reporting tool. It can be a pretty arduous endeavor, I would say. But so any way that we can streamline that process really helps us out. And so now, I can just send the email to Ingredion, and say, hey, I need data for our acres, for this commodity, and he's able to provide that quickly, and we have confidence in that data, and it's just really streamlined the process for us. So, I can't say enough about how much easier it is now to do it, and not only is it easier, so we don't have to crunch through as much data, but also in the past, we may just elect not to report on that data, and so now we're getting more data actually put into the system, and we're able to look at the data, and we can now start to compare year over year, what those outcomes are, and see how we're doing, see if we're trending in the right direction. And as Andy said, it frees us up on time and resources to do what's really important, and our next step is to use the data to inform, mitigation actions on the ground. So best management practices. So we get all that data rolled up for our acres. We can report it easily. I think what the next step is to kind of reconnect, send it back, and then unroll it, drill down, and kind of see where we might be having some opportunities for improvement. Then we could direct activities in those areas. So anyway, I just think it's been a very successful tool for us. So thank you, Chris and Rod and Andy.
Thank you, John. And so just to wrap up, I think, we'd really like to invite those of you who've heard this today and are maybe struggling with some of your data management in terms of just compiling the data and doing all of that manually. If you're interested in automating this process, we may have some ideas for you. So please reach out and let us use some of the alignment work that we've done, not just with Field to Market, but with other organizations as well, to help you streamline this reporting process so that, as John said and Andrew said, you can focus on engaging your supply chain in the areas that matter and spend less time on the data collection piece and assimilating spreadsheets and all of that fun stuff. So thank you all so much for your time today. Thank you for your effort, and thank you for being willing really to just try this out and test it out, because I think you were really the first ones to do it and it works. And so we'd really like to see this grow and see other people leverage this opportunity. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Christy.
All right. So y'all may have noticed we're a little behind on our agenda, which is okay, to be expected when we have a lot of interesting topics and also new technology that we're working through. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our next discussion, which is really a deeper dive into the research that we did with Trust in Food this year with our farmer perspectives on data report. We did this last year and it was such a success. We decided to do it again. And so Drew Slattery from Trust in Food is going to walk us through the highlights of the reports that he's done in conjunction with Kinsey Rayburn and Teresa Garcia Moore. Hi, Drew. How are you doing today?
Hi, Christy. I'm good. I'll let you advance the slides if that's easier.
All right. Yeah, I think
Excellent.
so.
Okay. So just to kind of level set before we dive into things, and I'm going to try to go really, really fast. So if I blow through something and you want more detail, just drop a note in the chat or try to connect with me afterwards. But I want to level set here in the beginning with this idea that farmers are human, right? To change farming, we must change humans, but humans are complex. So if you think about the organizations represented here today, we're talking about the largest supply chains in human history, millions and millions and billions of tons of agricultural inputs. But all of that starts with one individual, one human in dirty jeans and dirty boots in a dusty field doing manual labor. So this idea that we need to scale up on-farm data collection and farm level data management is right on the money, but that starts with one individual. Next slide. Excuse me. So a little bit of background here. This is our second year doing this report. A little bit of comparison between the years is maybe apples to oranges. The collaboration, this survey is not exactly a clinical survey. So we're not asking the same people the same questions at the exact same time every year. We've got slightly different questions this year, and we've got a slightly different sample. So any comparison, there needs to be a grain of salt taken with. But in the broad spectrum at the macro level, we think there's a lot of alignment between the 2 years. Next slide. So this was a confidential digital survey sent out to row crop producers in Farm Journal's database using Qualtrics. Our only qualification was that you needed to produce 50 acres or more and grow at least one of the 9 priority row crops. Excuse me, my voice is failing me today. We didn't offer any incentives for completion, and only completed surveys were included in the analysis. Next slide, Christy. Next slide. So a little bit of an overview of our sample. We had 610 complete surveys, broken down regionally here across the US. Really heavy in the Midwest, 26% in the Plains, 12 in the Atlantic region, 11 in the West, and 4 in the South. Keep moving, Christy. So some more sample details. On the left-hand side, you'll see age, and then on the right-hand side, you'll see education of our respondents. Pretty diverse in terms of education, so we've got people at both ends of the spectrum there. Next slide. So I'm going to pause here for a second just to let you digest what's here. On the left-hand side, we've got gross farm income, and on the right-hand side, we've got farm total acreage. A pretty diverse spread. Again, we're not really lopsided. We've got a little bit of underrepresentation from the smaller farms, but that's to be expected. Next slide. So here we're talking about or taking a look at what crops the respondents grow. Very heavy corn and soybean, wheat as well, down into the other crops like cotton, potatoes, sugar beets, rice, smaller percentages there. So when we're looking at these responses, keep in mind the types of production system that these farmers represent. You can go ahead and move on. One more. All right, so right into our key findings here. Right out of the gate, we think that there's a significant digital gap. So 62% of respondents don't rely on farm management information systems exclusively. And just to take a second here and help understand what we mean by FMIS, we know that there's lots of different digital platforms and software and tools that are out there that do different things. Some of them overlap, some of them don't, some do one thing and don't do another. For the purposes of this report, we're lumping all digital software, data collection, data management, decision-making under one umbrella, which is this FMIS umbrella. So even if the system that you're thinking of isn't technically an FMIS in your mind, it might be considered one here, just for simplicity's sake. So 28% said that their primary data storage method is paper or some sort of analog, not on a computer essentially. But perhaps most striking is that 50% of those who said that they're not using digital methods have never considered or have ever considered transitioning to digital. That's a pretty big gap. Moving on, our second key finding that I want to touch on here today is that with cost barriers addressed, precision technology use could increase significantly. So this is probably no surprise, but 79% of respondents said that they would start or increase their use of precision farm tech if they could acquire the equipment needed at no charge or at discount. So if the cost barrier, if the financial barrier is removed to this advanced technology, there's a lot of interest, almost universal interest in applying it to the farm. Down at the bottom, you'll see that satisfaction with FMIS outputs is mediocre. So we asked how satisfied you are with the outputs of your digital farm management solutions. 47% said that they are entirely satisfied. 6% said that they are entirely dissatisfied, meaning we've got about half, a little bit more than half, who aren't completely happy with what they're getting out of their digital farm management solution from a usability standpoint. So what that means is it might work for reporting, it might work for upstream or downstream in the supply chain, but it's not working for the farmer necessarily, or at least they don't feel like it's working for them. Next slide, Christy. So trusted advisors play a critical role, but those supporting the digital transition are sparse. 52% of our respondents said that they have a trusted advisor who could answer questions related to FMIS and digital ag. Last year, half said that their trusted advisor had never suggested increasing data collection. So I want to pause here for a second. That's really, really big. Both last year and this year, around half of our respondents are saying that their trusted advisor, their ag retailer, their agronomist, their input dealer, their whoever their trusted advisor is, we left that up to them to self-identify, either don't support or can't answer questions about data, digital tech, ag tech. That's a huge, huge problem in my mind. Down at the bottom, you'll see that 24% more likely to use FMIS. Those who have said that they do have an advisor who can support that. That's probably no surprise, but that's a really strong indicator that we need to look at how to empower the advisory sector, the retail sector, the input sector, the dealer sector, so that they're able to serve farmers around digital solutions. Last part on this slide that I want to touch on is the transparency concerns that are probably no surprise to anyone. 65% of our respondents said that their customer does not have a right to know how their crop was produced. And customer here is defined as whoever you get a check from. It doesn't matter if it's a co-op or a company or a CPG or whatever. Self-identify. Your customer doesn't have a right to know how you produce your grain. 65%, that's a fairly large number. And we saw that this sentiment is shared across FMIS users and non-users. So it's not like just the people who are managing on paper feel this way and the people who are using FMIS don't. It's a fairly even sentiment across the board. Next slide, Christy. So continuing in that theme, trust issues are significant, but lenders are the most trusted data holders. So 73% of respondents don't trust private companies with their data, no surprise. 58% don't trust the government, but 71% of our respondents said that they do trust their financial institutions with their farm level production data, which to me is really, really interesting. You know, if you think about the relationship between a farmer and their banker or their lender or their financial institution, it's usually a very long relationship. And while it might be a little bit of a tough love situation, they really do trust their financial institutions. So I think there's some more research that could happen here to really peel back the layers of that onion and understand from a human perspective why that trust exists at such a level there, but it doesn't exist, for example, to a CPG or to a supply chain organization or to the USDA for that matter. Down at the bottom, significant differences in FMIS usage exist across crop marketing outlets. So we asked respondents to tell us what their primary marketing method is for their harvest each year. Of those who market to a food or fuel company, those individuals are 10 to 28% more likely to be users of FMIS as compared to individuals who market to other outlets, especially animal feeding operations or those who use their harvest for animal feed themselves. So, 10% it maybe isn't so big, but when you get up to 28%, that's a pretty big gap. So if we're seeing farms that market to food and fuel companies with such significantly higher levels of FMIS use compared to feed marketers, why is that? We need to look into that. We need to understand that a little bit more so that we can understand the role that these marketing outlets play in enabling the digital transition at the farm level. Next slide, Christy. So now we're going to close with the barriers and the incentives that farmers see and feel to collecting and sharing data. So up on screen right now, you'll see that these are self-identified barriers that farmers face to collecting data. I'll give you a second just to kind of read through this slide. Down at the bottom, you'll see our biggest barriers are cost, lack of training and understanding, lack of equipment and technology. But across the board, kind of those top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there's not a big difference. There's a 15 percentage point spread across those top barriers. So while there certainly is, cost certainly got the highest response, there's not a lot of difference between these top barriers. Down at the bottom, you'll see the lowest scoring barrier is that there is no benefit in collecting more data than I already am. So that's important, I think. Let's go to the next slide. So the reason I called that out is that we see an 18% jump in the barrier. So this slide that's up now is barriers you face in sharing data. The last slide was in collecting data. So we see an 18% jump from collecting data to sharing data, and there is no benefit to the farmer, right? So farmers perceive that there is less benefit in sharing than they do in collecting by 18% or thereabouts, which I think is fairly significant. If there's not a business case for them to share, and if there's more risk involved in sharing than there is ROI or anything else benefit to their operation, they're not gonna see it, they're not gonna feel it, they're not gonna want to do it. Down at the bottom here, you'll see privacy concerns and fear of regulation are, far and away the largest barriers. But once you get under that, you see lack of training and understanding, and then collection is a problem. So we saw lack of training and understanding score pretty high for barriers to collecting. So there really is a technical outreach and a technical expertise situation at play here. Christy, you want to go to the next slide? So up on screen right now, we've got interest and incentives for collecting and sharing data. Basically, if we provided you with this, how likely would you be to collect and share more data than you already are? Right out of the gate, I think one of the most interesting things here is that they're all really high, right? 61% is our lowest interest incentive. So it's less about there being the right incentive, and it's more about there's several incentives that potentially could work, and we just need to identify the correct opportunity, time, and place for that incentive to be deployed. Down at the bottom, though, far and away, the most popular choice was tools to make their operation more profitable. That's probably no surprise, but that reinforces what we saw earlier with satisfaction levels of the outputs of FMIS software and solutions. Farmers want this stuff to work for them. They want data to enable them to operate at a higher level of efficiency and productivity. And that's the bottom line. So any way that we can do that, we need to be looking at how to do that. Next slide, Christy. So out of this research report, which is available for download in the files section of this session, here's kind of what we're looking at next, or the 4 opportunities that jumped out to us for where do we take this research next? What are some interesting things that we need to be looking into? So first, how do we use emerging carbon markets, ecosystem services markets to drive digital and FMIS adoption? Because we know that without that, these markets are going to struggle to operate as they want to. How can we better empower the trusted advisor network to promote the adoption of digital solutions for data collection and sharing? What is the role of crop buyers of all kinds in FMIS adoption and data collection? Going back to our statistic around those marketing to food and fuel companies being having higher FMIS rates. And then how can we best empower the next generation of farm management before and during the generational transition? So this goes back to that idea that 50% of those who aren't digital now said that they've never even considered it. When we dove into that a little bit more through an open-ended question, we found that most of the responses were, I'm too old, I'm going to retire soon, I don't know how to work computers, I don't want to learn this, old dogs, new tricks, some version of that. So if it really is the case that there's a significant amount of farms that are being managed by individuals who are a few years away from retirement and they just don't want to mess with it right now, how can we empower that next generation who's going to be in charge in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or whatever, to be able to quickly and easily scale up the data and digital transition for that operation once it's their turn. Next slide. Yeah, so I think that's it. Hopefully we're back on time now. We're getting close to it. Any questions, please drop them in the chat, reach out, or we can connect in the breakout sessions later today.
Thanks so much, Drew. And just so everyone knows, we will be launching this report will be available. And so we will put that link. I'll be sure and put it in the conference website. And as I pointed out for this session, there's a link for, there's an area for documents. And so I'll be sure and add that link there. So you can scroll through it. There's a lot of information to unpack here. So I know that was really a high level overview of our findings, but hopefully you found some nuggets in there that that you can take away. And so with that, I'd like to transition to really it's perfect. You know, what we've been building up to today is really trying to point out or highlight the activities that are happening in the agricultural metrics space, all of the digitization and the investment that's happening, and where there are gaps. And then really looking at partnerships and collaboration to try to fill those gaps. And what we learned from the Trust in Food research, our collaborative report, is that, you know, really when it comes down to making change, when it comes down to what would get a grower over the hump of making a change in practices, they year after year have reported financial assistance, some kind of incentive that would help them do that. And so that's really the focus of our next session here. We have been thinking about this for a long time at the Sustainability Consortium and really listening to all of you and really listening, trying to listen to the growers through our work with Trust in Food and the reports that many of you have done. And really trying to understand what is it that TSC can do next to drive impact, because that is our mission, is to drive impact. Now, we're not a farmer-facing organization. And so when it comes to agriculture, we do have incredible network of retailers and consumer goods companies and NGOs and universities. And so how can we leverage this incredible network to actually put best practices, regenerative agricultural practices on the ground? So that's what we've been thinking about for a while. And where we've landed is that we've conceptualized this idea of the TSC Resilient Agriculture Accelerator Fund. And this would be TSC's first impact investment fund. And the mission of the fund is to scale regenerative agriculture strategically in the United States and to specifically remove financial barriers that farmers are telling us that they're experiencing, that we know that they're experiencing, to be able to transition to those regenerative conservation ag practices. And really through this very targeted impact fund, be able to create resilient and stable food supply chains in the US that are also focused on conservation as well as thriving farm communities. We want our farmers to be profitable. And so this is the goals of the fund. So we are, we're thinking about TSC as being a trusted partner to engage large corporations, but also smaller companies. And so what we've seen in the consumer goods industry is there's large companies who are able to invest, but there are a number of other companies who are very interested in having boots on the ground impact. And so we really want this over time to be very inclusive of all sizes and all types of companies. And then really coming together to reduce that project startup friction. So what I've heard from a number of our members is, they're doing incredible work and they know that it's having impact, but the scale is really not where they want it to be. And they're also having to start a project up from scratch every time. And so we really want to reduce that startup friction and enable rapid project development and be able to work together with TSC kind of in the middle here to listen to what are the company's goals. What are you trying to achieve through your regenerative agriculture or conservation agriculture practices and your goals, and how do you want to achieve those goals? And then really being a bridge so that this fund would help support growers who are maybe interested in participating in the upcoming carbon and nutrient markets and need to kind of get on board and get prepared for that. And so, and also derive conservation economic benefit. And so really helping to this fund be the bridge that would help to prepare growers for those opportunities. And then primarily this is about scale. And so rather than having one-off projects in a particular geography, it's really about bringing people together and saying, what could we do when we bring everyone together and really look at joining forces and covering a lot of acres and getting best practices and funding directly to farmers and technical assistance directly to farmers so that we can scale this more rapidly than we could with individual projects. And so with that, that's the concept. And our current activities, we're really talking to our members and partners. And so I've been having a lot of one-on-one conversations with many of you that are here today. And if I haven't talked to you, you're on my list. And so just really trying to gauge interest and ask for participation in the Resilient Agriculture Fund. And there's several TSC members who have expressed very strong interest in joining the Accelerator Fund. And they're really specifically, they've got targets. They know where they want to focus. And I imagine many of you have those same targets in those same regions in your mind about where you want to focus next. And so we've been talking about wheat in North Carolina as well as North Dakota. We've talked about corn and soy in Iowa. And so those are the conversations we've been having with our individual members. And the way that this project would work, so I said TSC is not a farmer-facing organization, so we need a partner. And so I'd like to invite Dave Gagne to talk about the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and talk about our partnership and tell everybody who you all are and your role in the Agricultural Accelerator Fund.
Thanks, Christy. It is to think about what the NFWF is, and that is what most folks call us. Sometimes we say Gesundheit after they say that, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. And how is that a farmer-facing organization? Well, honestly, I left 15 years ago this month to come from NRCS to NFWF to work with a gentleman by the name of Jeff Trandle. He's still our CEO. And Jeff, some of you might remember from his days on Senator Pat Roberts' staff, his time on House Ag Approps. So, he's just a good South Dakotan. And he got me to come over to the NFWF. And what is NFWF? Well, we were founded in 1984 to do public-private partnerships. And that kind of sounds like what Christy was just talking about, some of it. So they founded us in 84. People will ask, are you public or private? And we just answer, yes, we are. We're a little bit public, we're a little bit private. We do get some limited annual appropriations, but most of what we do is in the form of donations from corporations, as well as cooperative agreements that we do with federal agencies. So you'll notice a number of things here. I think we actually might have hit 19,000 almost now. I got to change some of the numbers. Thousands and thousands of organizations that have gotten grants from us over the years, over $6 billion. We don't fund advocacy. We don't fund lawsuits, litigation, lobbying. We are straight about work on the ground. And folks will ask, well, how much ag are you doing? Probably over $50 million worth of grants every single year in the ag sector. And that could be anything from row crop soil health projects to grasslands, different silviculture, all kinds. It really doesn't matter as long as it's within one of the spectrums that we're working. Go ahead, Christy. Thank you. And so why was NIFWF and TSC getting together? Because we wanted to work on the same, Christy approached us, and what we discovered was we were really interested in the exact same things. We were working on soil health. We were working on the economic impact on those growers. Why should a grower do something if it doesn't pencil out? Why were so many of the companies that we were both partnering with or have members in TSC's case, they're interested in increasing the amount of activities they do, et cetera. So how can we scale up all those activities, do that together? We do grants. We don't actually do the work on the ground, but we know who does do the work out on the ground, be it a organization, say like an Illinois corn or an Iowa soybean or Montana or Colorado cattlemen's, et cetera, Virginia dairy producers. We're going to know who's doing that work out in the field. Maybe it's Pheasants Forever or American Farmland Trust, but we can go out and get that work done in a science-based fashion on the ground with the landowners, help make that happen. Please go ahead. So this is just one of those business slides. You'll see on the left-hand side, we've got our non-federal partners. On the right-hand side, our federal. We're doing that in a very science-based focused area. I always like my longleaf pine trees on the far right that made up the vast majority of the Southeast 400, 500 years ago, and now represents less than 2% of the forested areas in the South. But how are we increasing those numbers? By everyone having a chance to sit at the table. And that's one of those things that we do. Go ahead. So just another good example of we've got the conservation need at the top there. We're looking for those partners at the federal and private levels, and we're looking for measurable outcomes. Everything is based on science, metrics, et cetera. We're not just handing out checks to any organization to say, hey, go shake hands. We've got metrics that we want to learn about what's going on out there. I will say the Drew's presentation previously for the Trust in Food report really gives rise to notice, 65% of growers that have a negative feeling about doing any of this on their lands, have that negative feeling about anyone knowing what's going on their property. But we all know as well how much interest there is out there. So is that 35%, or is part of that 65%, as we all know with anybody in our family that's a farmer or farmers that we know, they're into privacy. So how do we make these things happen in that atmosphere, still getting those outcomes that we're looking for? Go ahead. So we came up with the idea, and here's some of what we're talking about. These are some of the initial goals that we've laid out. Like Christy said, we're talking to folks, we're knocking on doors, we're going to build this. And this will grow over time to the point where we're able to put a lot of projects, grants, success out there out there on the landscape with growers in the grower community. Be it wheat, corn, soy, sorghum, just doesn't matter. Whatever that rotation might be. We're looking to get out there and put trusted advisors out in the field with folks. That's not to say, remember, I came from NRCS, and those are wonderful, wonderful people, and they're going to play a gigantic role in all of this. We're going to try and tap into their funds, their programs as well. No reason not to. But with that staff being 3,000 less people than when I was there 15 years ago, and more money than they've ever had, that makes for a hard delivery system. So how do we use those ag retailers? How do we use those different agronomists that are working locally that aren't NRCS? So how do we get that done? Go ahead, Christy. And then we discovered something. Christy, you want to tell everyone what we discovered?
Yes. So as we were building this partnership and building out this concept and setting these ambitious goals, so just to reiterate, we're wanting to raise $2 million this year to kick this fund off. And for every dollar we raise, we at least get $1 in matching funds, and oftentimes more than that. And so as we were launching this concept, we also found out that there was a similar initiative that was happening very specifically around corn and soy. Corn and soy. Is that, I'm sure people do that all the time. So really, found out that they were doing a very similar initiative to really focus on those crops in 4 states. And what we saw was that there was an incredible opportunity to partner here. And so I want to introduce John from the Pork Board to maybe give an overview of Farmers for Soil Health and give everyone an overview, and then we'll talk about how we're going to collaborate.
Thank you, Christy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Johnson. I'm the former Chief Operating Officer of the National Pork Board, the checkoff organization for the pork industry. And today I've transitioned to a role supporting them as a consultant, primarily in the area of conservation and sustainability. So as Christy mentioned, while she and Dave were strategizing about how to build the Ag Accelerator Fund starting a little over a year ago, at the same exact time, a little over a year ago, the National Pork Board, the National Corn Growers Association, and the United Soybean Board had begun thinking about how to really scale up conservation. The 3 organizations signed an MOU back in late 2018 to collaborate on sustainability research. And all of our organizations have set sustainability goals and metrics for our commodities, our respective commodities. But in our conversations, we realized we needed a ground game for how we're going to execute against those goals. And so we came together and said, let's build this informal collaboration we're titling Farmers for Soil Health. So what's really unique about this is, number one, as Christy pointed out, it's focused on scaling up conservation and sustainability practices, regenerative ag, whatever term you want to use, because we have lots of small efforts scattered around the country, and they're great work, no criticism intended of it. But in corn and soybeans, we're looking at 180 million acres in this country. And if you look at, say, data from the Conservation Tillage Information Center, we've flatlined in our conservation tillage and cover crops over the past 15 years. We've got plenty of runway ahead of us in terms of going down that path of continuous improvement. So how do we scale up those efforts in a meaningful way, recognizing many times dollars are a major issue, as some of the conversations today have indicated. How do you mitigate the risk of somebody adopting a new practice? And so we set the goal of raising $30 million over a 10-year period to advance conservation practices on 30 million acres of corn and soybeans by 2030. Pretty ambitious goal, but we think it's achievable. We've set up 3 buckets for investment. One is an unrestricted bucket for general build out of the effort. Programmatic dollars covers a wide range of things from farmer education to outreach and technical assistance, may include financial assistance in some cases, some cost share dollars. Then we're folks who might want to contribute matching funds for a specific grant opportunity. That's the second bucket. Right in front of us today, we have our first project that's going to be launched underneath the NRCS RCPP Alternative Funding Arrangement, AFA. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in the breakouts later, but it's focused on increasing cover crop acres in corn and soybean in 4 states of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and Iowa, titled We've Got You Covered. We're looking to enroll 140,000 acres of new acres into cover crops. Then we're going to look at other NRCS grant opportunities as well, the classic RCPP, Conservation Innovation Grants, and cooperative agreements. And then there might be opportunities to pursue grants from other foundations and the like. The third and final bucket is for directed funding. If a stakeholder wants to invest with us in a very particular project that we might not have clear line of sight on today, we want to have a catch-all for that, a specific conservation practice in a specific watershed, if you will, something that might be a little bit unusual. So we'll have that third and final bucket for custom projects, if you will, for specific interest. So that's the ambitious BHAG goal. 30 million acres advanced by 2030 and $30 million raised. And go ahead, Christy, to the next slide. you can see from this, and Chris, you can chime in here, the similarities between the goals and objectives of the two efforts, the Ag Accelerator Fund and Farmers for Soil Health. When we realized that we had this alignment in almost identical goals and objectives, we said that doesn't make sense to have a redundant effort, a duplicative effort. We have the farmer voice, which I think is a really important distinctive for Farmers for Soil Health. This is the farmers' own organizations, National Corn Growers, United Soybean Board, National Pork Board, all saying to their farmer members, we want to go down this path of advancing sustainability. This isn't NRCS, this is not EPA, this is not an environmental group or a major retailer telling farmers you need to do this. This is the farmers' own organization saying, pragmatically, how recognizing that economic sustainability is important, but we also need to go down the road for embracing more of these sustainability practices. How can we advance that, accelerate that, and increase that adoption rate there? I think it's a wonderful opportunity. I was thrilled when I learned of what Christy had been working on, and Dr. Brett Kaysen, who has a membership for National Pork Board with TSC, brought this to me. And once I saw it, I said, this makes great sense for us just to align these two efforts. And so our two organizations have agreed to do that moving forward.
Thank you, John. We were excited to find out about your initiative too. And I just think that it's really just perfect timing and a way to align two very large initiatives that and just combine efforts. And so just to talk about the roles of the partnership. And so as we are, now you've heard about the TSC Accelerator Fund, we have Farmers for Soil Health, which has a very, very specific target with corn and soy and for states, just to kick it off, but that's going to be expanding. And so really when I mentioned that TSC, our focus is on really understanding the priorities of our members, and that's really what's led to this. And understanding the priorities of our members, as well as making it easier to report and collect information in the supply chain, and also make improvements in the supply chain. And that's where Thesis, our platform, comes in. And really, one of the goals of this, of the Ag Accelerator Fund, is to really help translate and move data from farm into Thesis more easily, but also just to gauge the impact that these types of programs could have through looking at the information that is shared through the Thesis platform. And then also just to connect the dots. Oftentimes we've already had a lot of conversations where we're with members where we're starting to realize that they have overlapping supply chains and that there's opportunity to collaborate here. And so that's really the role, kind of where TSC sits, and really trying to engage with our membership and our network to bring to bear those investments that can really help to scale conservation and regenerative agriculture on the ground. And then John, do you want to describe a little bit about the Farmers for Soil Health and the fact that you're farmer facing and what that brings to this?
Well, I mentioned it very briefly, but to expand on that, I think the fact that Farmers for Soil Health is an initiative of the National Corn Growers, United Soybean Board, and the National Pork Board. And I should perhaps explain Pork Board's role in that, since you understand this initiative is focused on corn and soybeans. 50% of pork's environmental footprint comes from the production of corn and soybeans. And so when we started talking together, the three organizations, about our respective goals and metrics, we realized we were all joined at the hip. And every corn farmer is also a soybean farmer. Every soybean farmer is also a corn farmer, and every hog farmer feeds both corn and soybeans, and half the hog farmers also grow them. So it made sense for us to collaborate here on this initiative to really, how do we scale up sustainability practices in a meaningful way to make progress against our respective goals and metrics. And the fact that this message is going to be delivered to the farm community from the farmers' own organizations, I think gives it a great credibility and will enhance the receptiveness of the audience to considering the message and the challenge for them to look for ways to make their farm more resilient to climate change, to be better stewards, and to accelerate the adoption of some of these practices. So I think the fact that we're the farmer-facing and farmer-led organizations gives a lot of credibility to the message of Farmers for Soil Health. And with TSC and the Ag Accelerator Fund being supporting it financially and looking to raise funds for it. And then with NIFWIF being there as a grant administrator, I think that's a incredibly great fit, using the talents and resources of each organization to maximize the overall effort.
Great. And with that, what I'd like to do is perhaps we can share, just briefly talk about the goal that we're trying to reach with the Farmers for Soil Health initiative. And then anyone who's interested will do a short breakout session. I realize we're getting short on time, but I do want to give us the opportunity to ask more detailed questions. And so if you're interested in this opportunity, then I encourage you to join one of the breakout sessions that'll be launching in just a few minutes. And so, John, do you want to give an overview of really the opportunity that's in front of us right now that actually has a pretty tight timeline?
Yes, it does. So this is what I mentioned briefly, the RCPP AFA proposal for our cover crop initiative, which we've titled We've Got You Covered. And I should have had on this slide the number of acres we're seeking to enroll. I mentioned it's 140,000 acres of corn and soybean ground that we're looking to get enrolled into cover crops. So it provides an opportunity for other stakeholders to join with us to raise funds to facilitate this effort. We're looking for a $20 million effort over 5 years. And so that's a one-to-one matching grant we're seeking from NRCS. So we're seeking a $10 million grant. And since they require one-to-one match, we have to raise at least $7 million in cash, as well as perhaps up to $3 million in-kind services and other matching funds. That money gets distributed, as you can see there. Farmer incentives are the lion's share of the payments. NRCS requires 70% to go back to the farm. The balance is split between technical assistance and relationship management, as well as outreach and promotion. That's a really key component of this communications effort, because if we enroll, say, 300 to 350 farmers in this effort to get 140,000 acres, that's not all we're looking to get done. But we're looking to leverage their experiences, those 300 farmers on 140,000 acres. How can we take their learnings, their experiences, and share them with the broader farm community and really get other folks on the adoption curve without cost share? Because we can't raise enough money to cost share on every acre of the 180 million acres in the country. But we want to take the advantage of the folks who do participate in this, have them be willing to share their stories in social media, earned media, paid media, and the like, so that we can really expand their influence and help others down the adoption path. So it's going to be an exciting effort. We do have a short timeline because this grant proposal, the deadline for it is May 28th. And so Christy said she was going to collect checks at the door this afternoon.
I will do that. So if you are interested in joining this grant proposal and are interested in joining this effort, please let us know as soon as you can, and we'll be happy to set up some calls with you and give you more information. I'm also going to give you the chance to get more information right now through our breakout sessions. So these are a little shorter than we had planned, but we're going to have about 10 minutes together. So we'll break out into some smaller groups. And so what you will see on the screen is you'll have 5 different options. So there's 2 options for the Ag Accelerator Fund. If you would just choose by your last name, if you have the name A through M, join group 1. If you have the last name N through Z, join group 2. And same thing for the farmers' perspectives on data. If you want more information on that report and to have conversation there, same situation, join group 1 or 2 based on your last name. And then if you're interested in the Feeding Our Food discussion group, then please join that with Teresa Moore. And so with that, I'll let Jen launch our breakout groups, and please select the one that you would like to attend. For a few minutes and probably just barely started to scratch the surface on a discussion, but hopefully you'll find a way to follow up with us or follow up with the group leader if you had questions that were still burning and remain unanswered. If you need any follow-up from us, please let us know. And I just want to really thank you all for, most of you have been with us through the entire session today. So I just want to thank you for joining us today. I want to thank you for the efforts that you all all do in your respective roles to really drive sustainability. And I know that you all are looking forward to the rest of the summit this week. And so we have a number of other sessions that you can join. There is an agriculture related session every day. So if you are interested in those, please seek those out. And again, I just want to thank you so much for your time and your energy and your effort and your attention today. And please do follow up with us if you have any questions or comments. And we look forward to interacting with you throughout the week at the rest of the summit. And I want to thank all of our speakers. Thank you so much for bearing with us as we figured out the technology, and for your time and effort in preparing. Really do appreciate you. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Christy.
Chris, my chat was disabled since I wasn't a panelist.
Okay.